Amazing. So I think that we can start the session. So first of all, thanks a lot everyone for being here today, for investing your time with us today. My name is Alan. I am part of the Makers Fellowship. If you don't know Makers, Makers is an NGO. Makers is an NGO where we help founders and students in their 25 from Latin America to become exceptional. We do this by providing them with access with a free educational program and a community. What we want to do is to give everyone the opportunity to be a founder. We don't think that everyone should be a founder, but that everyone should have the opportunity to be one. And one of the initiatives that we launched along with Andres Bilbao, who is one of the founders of this initiative, Makers, was with all the hype of artificial intelligence and all of that, we wanted to democratize the access to the information to all of this, but not only to the makers, but to everyone, mostly because there are many startups that are starting to build solutions related to AI, but most of them are only using the large language model, like connected to the API and stuff like that, which is good, but we want to really understand and have a better and make this easier for everyone to understand, like how is it that these type of models tend to work. And for this, we brought some amazing speakers. The first one of them being Sebastián Ramos. I got the opportunity to meet Sebastián at Latitude, and to me, once I saw his background when I was in Latitude, I was impressed because Sebastián has more than 10 years of experience in the field. He has a PhD in computer science, if I'm not wrong. And right now he is the founder of TensorAI, where he is helping to save people's life with artificial intelligence. And today he will be giving to us a masterclass about artificial intelligence, healthcare in general. So Sebastián, thanks a lot for being here today, for sharing your knowledge, and well, the scenario is all yours.
Thank you so much, Alan, and everyone for the invite and for being here. Just confirming you hear me well, because I had some problems before.
We can hear you well.
Cool. All right, I will start sharing my screen. I prepared some slides, but the idea is to have this as a conversation more than anything else. Feel free to ask any questions or anything you would like to know.
I think Sebastián left he left the call by accident, but he will be back. But for those who are just joining, basically, today is the first session of a series of sessions that we will be having related to artificial intelligence. Why? Because we want to democratize the access to the information of this field, given that in the last, I think, 6 months, there has been a lot of excitement about the artificial intelligence. We want that everyone is able to understand the basics, not an expert, not to become an expert, but to understand the basics of how these large language models, such as GPT, BART, and Llama, I think is the one from Meta, from Facebook, work. So what we are doing is that we are, I think Sebastián is back.
What we are doing, I'm back, sorry.
No worries. What we are doing is that we are bringing people like Sebastián to talk to us. And well, Sebastián basically is an expert. He has a PhD and he will share with us more about his experience in the field.
Okay. Can you see my screen, my presentation for the screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Basically, I would like to talk a little bit about what I call the concept from 0 to 1 in AI, a little bit as an analog, like analog to the book of Peter Thiel about building startups, how to go from 0 to 1, and something that is really my big passion in life, which is building products to save people's life. So the idea is to have 30 minutes of going through some slides that I prepare, but anytime you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And then at the end also, we will have a Q&A. I would love to hear your questions, comments, and any thoughts on what is going on currently on AI. So a little bit who I am. I am from Colombia. I'm from Bogota. When I was 14 years old, my father had a traffic accident that and he was about to die. And that basically changed my life from that moment on. So I was studying at one of the biggest universities in Colombia, and I got sent to Germany to finish my bachelor and do my master. And then I got into the topic of robotics, which was not as hype as it is currently, but it was super interesting. I got to work in many different applications with different type of robots. And then after my master, I moved to Stuttgart. I was in Munich, and then I moved to Stuttgart to the main part of Mercedes-Benz, where I was in the research center, and I was doing my PhD on autonomous driving using artificial intelligence. At that point, it was pretty interesting because autonomous driving was going on for many decades, but during my PhD were those years where AI was making a huge difference, and many companies started to also do autonomous driving and invest a lot of money into this. So it was a great PhD experience. Then in 2017, I moved to Volvo, where I was leading the AI department at Volvo. Here is part of my team. It was a pretty nice experience to build a team from scratch and participate into the building the pipeline of self-driving cars for Volvo. And more recently, I started in 2020 my first startup, which is called Tensorai. Actually, that startup is completely in Munich, and we are doing software for autonomous driving. It remains being my passion. However, last year I moved back to Latin America, and I founded my second startup, which is called Buna. We are currently is still a little bit in a stealth mode, so therefore the name is not so public. But the idea of both startups is to save people's life through technology, being kind of very close to what happened to me when I was 40 years old, being very close to lose my father due to a traffic accident, and also having my father in a hospital recovering himself for many months. So at Buna, what we do is we help hospitals and clinics all around Latin America to improve many of their processes so that they can give better care to their patient and they can treat more patients every month. Most of you have been in a hospital or have had a family in a hospital, and you know that going through emergency, waiting many hours is really a difficult situation when you or so a relative of yourself is going through a bad situation. So we are helping hospitals to help people and really save people's life in a better way. Great. I would like to first start talking about what is artificial intelligence really, a little bit in contrast to what people understand in general when they talk about artificial intelligence. When people talk about AI, people associate this to what is going on with ChatGPT or other systems before, but actually artificial intelligence is a field much broader than that. It started actually not a few years ago, but in the 40s of the last century. And there have been many research that has brought us to the point that we are currently. So in 4 big groups, we have artificial intelligence, and then a part of that is machine learning, which is basically the creation of algorithms that can learn things through data. And one of those algorithms are neural networks. And then one way of train and kind of produce applications with these neural networks is deep learning. And deep learning is kind of the closest, or is the concept that encapsulates everything that is going on since 2012, basically, with many applications, as you have seen, as DeepMind released AlphaGo, now OpenAI released ChatGPT, and so on. Also, something important to notice when you talk about machine learning is that there are 3 main ways of learn, and then there are many different things that come out of those 3 ways, right? The first one is supervised learning, and that means you have a model or you have an algorithm, you have data, And then you have a sort of supervisions that help the model understand information from that data. For example, making the parallel to a baby learning is like a baby is able to learn what a horse is because it is getting visual data from horses, but at the same time that the parents are saying to the baby, hey, this is a horse. And they are explaining what a horse is. So the learning is a supervised way. There is another way of learning, which is unsupervised, which is also through data, but there is no this supervision, right? So there are other concepts that we as a humans learn where there is no one telling us this is that or this is this, right? And the last thing is reinforcement learning. This is very used in robotics, which is basically learning from rewards that you get as an output of actions. So when we are learning to walk, we try to stand up, then we give some steps, and then we fell down, and then we try again. And every time we are learning things through that process in a reinforcement way. So these are the three main ways of how to learn using in machine learning. As I mentioned before, this didn't start this decade or last decade. This started in the 40s of last century. And there have been, in my view, 4 key moments that brought us to 2023, where what we are experiencing right now. What we can see in the 2 red circles is what was called the winters of AI. There was these periods where people, mainly in academia and some in industry, said, hey, there is actually no point of continued research of these algorithms because this is not providing the performance and the results we were expecting. And there was until a new thing came out that people started to stop working on this. And it was kind of very critical. And some years ago, people was talking again about a next winter of AI, which most probably is not going to happen given what is going on right now. The other 2 key points was in 2012. Most people don't know this. I think most people know, for example, when was the release of AlphaGo or these things that went to media. But in 2012, a really nice thing happened. There was the creation at Stanford of a very big data set, which was called ImageNet. Was more than 1 million images. And at the same time, the hardware industry brought up the GPUs, and combining a large data set with the compute power of GPUs, making possible to have algorithms like neural networks in a large scale, that provides something that no one expected. That was much better results than nothing else seen before for more than 70 years. And from that point on, many academic people in research centers, industries, and so on has been building on top of what happened in that moment to the point that we are today. And the last recent moment was the release of ChatGPT, where so many millions of people are now interacting with AI systems, which was not happening before. A little bit of the difference between, or what is the key essence of what is happening now with the algorithms that are using companies like Google, OpenAI, Meta, and so on. With traditional machine learning systems, there was this thing that you could get better performance up to a certain point, and when you increase the amount of data, there was basically nothing happening. So it was kind of a saturation point of the performance of these algorithms. But with deep learning, based on neural networks, what is happening is that if you increase the amount of data and if you increase the size of the networks, then the performance continues improving and improving and improving. And this is super interesting because there should be a balance between size of networks and data so that you don't create what is called overfitting. That is basically that a model kind of learn by memory only the data that it sees and cannot predict anything else outside outside the training data. So this is something that should be avoided. But if you find this the right trade-off between amount of data and network size, you can increasingly get better and better and better performance. So kind of the keys here is the amount of data, the network size, and there is something super important as well, which is tricks how to train those models. And when you listen to, for example, the chief scientist of OpenAI, and people ask him, what is coming next? What basically he says is, what is coming next is increasing more data. For example, not just using text or what is in the web about language, but also using vision, increasing the amount of computing power that we are using to train these models, to be able to increase the network size, which is, for example, what Elon Musk said recently, that Tesla is going to invest more than $1 billion into compute power, and then continue doing the research on which are these tricks to train and fine-tune these models in the best way. The last thing, which is pretty amazing about the current models that are used for many applications, is that before, when you were looking for the best solution for a vision problem, the algorithm was something different than the best solution for a language problem or the best solution for a robotics problem. Currently, the best solution for these three problems and many others are the same algorithms. What changed is basically the data and a little bit of the structure of the network. But everything else is pretty much the same, which is pretty incredible. All right, before going to the second part of the talk, what I wanted to show here is that AI has been going on for more than most of the people think, and there is many more things that large language models that people are used to right now. So if you guys really want to understand AI, it would be really interesting to understand many other parallel alternatives to the large language models, because not everything is a language problem, and not all products that could be the best solution to the problem you find if you want to create a startup or if you are doing research are going to be related to large language models. So it's an invitation for you to explore a little bit more about what AI is and everything that has happened from the beginning up to now, which has been around 60 years of research by many, many people. Second point I want to make during this short presentation is how to go from 0 to 1 in AI. So recently, Y Combinator released their report where they basically say that more than 60% of the startups accepted during the summer batch are AI startups. And the total was around 160. And as Alan was saying at the beginning, many products created right now are basically a connection of large language models to integration to a website, a communication channel, or many other things, and trying to solve a particular problem. The thing is that there is many questions about what happens, for example, if at some point companies creating these large language models become more restrictive or to the access of those models. Also, what happens if, for example, at some point, there are many startups doing the same, what is going to be the technological key difference, right? And here, what I want to illustrate in the bottom of the slide is that creating a product based on AI has different phases. First, understanding the problem. Second, and in my view, extremely important, identifying and working with the key data for solving that problem. Then you select the model that is best suited to put a technological solution, you train the model, and then you test the model. One of the examples is we working at hospitals. For example, we want to predict many things happening in the hospital. For example, we want to predict what is the length of stay of a patient entering hospitalization, because this is going to allow the doctors and the nurses to treat the patient in the most efficient way so that the patient is not too long in the hospital, reduce the number of the hospital, and at the same time, freeing up beds so that more patients can come in, right? And one of the things that we realize is that the hospitals give us tons and tons and tons of data about each patient. But then we were making a study, and for example, of 100 data types for each patient's clinical, coming from clinical history, coming from symptoms that they have when entering the hospital, coming from vital signs. Actually, around 10 to 15 were the most relevant to train a deep learning model and produce an MVP solution. So it's super important to understand the data and also to use the data in the best way in order to don't waste time and resources on just doing a brute force approach, putting all data you have without any structure and putting it in a model and then trying to get something out. In my particular view, most of the biggest opportunities currently for startups rely on data. And then the difficulty is coming into an industry where most of the data is not being structured, where most of the data is not being utilized, and then changing that to be able to produce sound solutions for that. All right, this is the last slide. And then I would like to open up for a Q&A. When we talk about products that save people life, there is a key difference between solving AI or building AI applications and building safety critical AI applications. When you build AI applications, most of the times your goal or your metric that you want to optimize for is the performance. If you want, for example, to build a recognition system used within Instagram, then you want that the system, the percentage of right recognitions of the system is most of the time right. In safety critical applications, actually that's not the main metric. The main metric is to avoid that the AI models come in what people call corner cases, or in a colloquial language, difficult situations. There is these things that, for example, large language models, when you ask them something that they are not really used to answer or that they don't have much information about it, they hallucinate and they create out of the blue answers that don't make any sense, being very certain that this is the right thing. So imagine using one of these models by a doctor asking them for a treatment of a patient. If the model doesn't give the right answer and the doctor believes that, it's going to be a big problem. So in safety critical AI applications, really, of course, the performance is extremely important, but even more important is the safety of the people that are in contact with those applications. And this creates a whole new complexity of creating these applications that makes the building of the products and the testing of the products much more difficult. But of course, if you succeed building those products, then you are going to impact millions of lives, which is amazing and extremely rewarding. Two of the applications are where I have spent more than a decade. One of them is autonomous driving. It is shocking that more than 1 million people lose their life every year in traffic accidents. And if you take a look of the accidents, there are many, many, many things that can be prevented. So autonomous driving is a technology that is making a huge difference there, and is going to continue making a huge difference over many years. And on the other hand, in hospitals, when you go to a hospital, you see that less than 3% of the data generated into a hospital is used effectively. And that means that there is a lot of things that can be optimized in hospitals, and the penetration of the technology is really, really small compared to the penetration of technology in many other industries. But actually, it should be one of the industries where technology should have a biggest impact because we are talking about people's life. We are talking about those situations and those environments where we put our life into the hands of other people, another device. And with that, I would like to open to Q&A. Hope this brought to you some starting point to have a nice conversation.
I have a question.
Yep.
This is more like kind of like in like personal, but so if you have an idea to start an AI model, but you think it's pretty good and it would be like more into like content creation for like influencers and all this like world, but you have no idea about like computer science or like anything in that area, you're more into marketing, how would you start? I don't know if you understood me with my question,
Yeah, I think.
but yeah. Hello.
Sorry, I lost a little bit the end of the question.
Hello, did you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, I okay, great. I heard the question. I think that's pretty interesting. I think one of the keys here is to, of course, understand what are the possible solutions you can. I don't think everyone should be an expert in AI or everyone should be collecting tons of data to solve AI problems or invest in billions in compute. But I think there should be a decent understanding of the different possibilities you could have to solve the problem. And then also a risk assessment. If you are building a product or an application on top of knowledge from someone else, what happens if that becomes not accessible in the future? So it's kind of course, startups or are building products is always going to risk, but also thinking a little bit about more long-term and start building that knowledge. I think what makes the difference is when you understand a little bit of AI alternative and you are an expert in your field, saying, hey, I'm an expert in marketing, I know which are the pain points here, and I want to start something where I can make a difference compared to anything else that has been in the market. Then you could probably build something very interesting, but I would advise you to don't forget, start understanding into AI, which I think is the most common mistake I see in founders and people building products. They say they are building AI companies without really having an understanding of what AI means. And that's the main problem at the end, is that it leads to a huge waste of resources and time. And this is what you could avoid if you invest some time learning about that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Sebastian?
Yeah, sorry, I think I had a trouble in the connection, but now I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I think next one is Daniel Moreno. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Sebastian. Nice to meet you. My name is Daniel. Thank you a lot for your time. I'm going to present myself really shortly. I've been a biomedical vision researcher for about 3 years, and now I am a founder in the sector of health tech. I know that there are a lot of challenges when you are dealing with AI in highly regulated ecosystems such as health, and particularly in the field of data management. So, for example, you have to comply with things such as HIPAA compliance, or, for example, the models that you will deploy must be, for example, deployed in private clouds. I find your experience in your second startup really interesting, and I wanted to ask you, how have you dealt with that? Like, what are you doing from your startup? Like, which are those big challenges in terms of compliance, and how have you tackled them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Sorry that I have to turn on my camera, but sometimes the sound is breaking up. When we started this product that is the core of Buna, actually we started that in Germany. And one of the things that I realized pretty fast was two things. The first one is that going into hospitals in Germany or in general in Europe to understand the problems could have been very, very hard. And the other thing is that if I could manage doing that, building the product based on their data is going to also be a nightmare. So basically what I did was coming back to Colombia and starting doing that, but in Latin America. We have, I think, a huge opportunity to build health tech products in Latin America, because of course we need to follow those regulations, but people in the institutions are not as picky and as strict as in the US, Europe, and so on. Of course, there is certain level of things that you need to fulfill, and we follow very, very closely GDPR and HIPAA for the products we build. At the same time, being in Colombia, we are able to iterate much faster on our products, gather data, test things in our clients. We have more than 10 clients at the moment. Some of them come from big groups which have more than 50 hospitals. And developing the product is much easier than in other regions. Then when you have a very solid product, and of course you follow the regulations, then you can go to the regions. This is one part of the answer. And the other part, something super important, is you may know that in medical, in the health tech products, there are different classifications of the product you are building. It could be a medical device of different classes, or it could be a non-medical device. And I think starting by the lowest category is a very good starting point, and there is huge problems and huge possibilities there. For example, the software we are bringing to hospitals is a non-medical device because we are not directly interfering to the treatment to the patients, but at the same time, we are allowing hospitals to treat more patients and helping and assisting doctors to treat patients in a better way. So I think there is kind of works around that. And at the end of the day, of course, the idea is to go to many regions, and the idea is to have a product that is not complex for being complex, but is complex for being able to solve complex problems. But then I don't think going directly to the final thing is the right way into it.
Okay, Sebastián, thanks a lot. I have like a short follow-up question. In terms of, for example, team management, how have you dealt with that? For example, as a biomedical engineer, I know that, for example, some stuff about regulation, for example, that class 2B medical devices are, for example, the ones involved in diagnosis, and well, some stuff about HIPAA compliance and that. But I don't know if maybe in your team, do you have like someone specifically that works only in regulatory space, or how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, we don't have someone that only works on that, but we have people with deep knowledge on that, people that have been in the medical device industry for decades and that know exactly where to start and how to follow that certification process. I think that's if you are going to work, or if you are working in health tech, this is also knowledge very important for your project.
Okay, thank you very much, Sebastián. Thanks for your time, and it was nice to meet you.
Thank you. Same here.
I think next one is Jessie Reyes.
Hi, Sebastián. Good to see you
Hi,
again.
Jessie.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about earlier you were talking about how in your current startup, you were able to gather a lot of data from the different hospitals, and then you sort of sifted through the data to get quality data that you could train your model on. When you have decided like what kind of data is applicable to the solution you're working on, twofold question here. How do you decide what is quality data for that? And then if you get to that point where you have your chunk of quality data, if it's too small, what do you do at that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of the data that you find, for example, in hospitals, is not quality data in the sense that it doesn't have any structure, and doesn't have any centralization whatsoever. So basically what we do is that we understand, talking to our customers, which are the possibilities of data we could have access to. And then we get a huge list of many things. And then we start to understand two things. First, how easy is to access, give structures and give quality to every single potential data type. And also how important can be each data type for the performance of your model. And at the end of the day, the first one you can do by really understanding where the data comes from, if you could modify how the data is saved, how the data is managed, if the data is accumulated and so on. So it's basically a conversation and an investigation, a conversation with the hospital and an investigation of the current software that is kind of gathering those data in the hospitals. The other thing is making experiments. And for that, you don't need a huge amount of data. With a very small set of data, you can make some experiments, and then you can realize, okay, from these 100 data types, actually the most important ones are these 15. And then you try to find a trade-off between these two variables, and you start constructing a first data set. I think if it turns out that the data you can access to is very small, there is algorithms, AI algorithms that are not deep neural networks that can produce great results with a small amount of data. And this is why I was saying, hey, it's important to understand what AI means and not just deep learning or neural networks. But most probably the performance is not going to be as nice as the performance with a huge amount of data with a huge model. So you have alternatives, and then also depending the performance requirements you have, you could use other things.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer, and great having you on this first panel here.
Thank you.
Great. Piero?
Hey, Sebastián. My name is Piero.
Hi.
A quick introduction. I'm the founder of People. We are basically a digital clinic for oncology. So my question is more like on the approach of how do you adapt AI and on which specific projects. So when do you know when a problem must be solved with artificial intelligence versus some other technology? Do you have any like mental opportunity to solve something with AI? And what's your like first version of AI project? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So could you briefly repeat, you are the founder of a startup working in oncology, or did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are a digital clinic for oncology.
Okay, cool. Great. I think this is one of the most important questions everyone should ask him and herself before trying to apply AI. Is like, does it make sense to apply AI here? I would say if you could give value to your customers without using AI, you should start with it. Because having a complex technological complex solution, it doesn't mean you have a great product. It just means you have a complex solution in terms of technology. So having said that, if, for example, you need capabilities that not other technology can offer, for example, prediction or many other things, then most probably AI is the answer. But I always advise to people, hey, don't use AI just for using AI. Use AI. Hopefully, once you have built that layer, that first layer in your product that doesn't need AI, or already give value to your customers, and which can give you access to data to add AI and then add new functionalities to your product. I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, actually it is. And that's something that in my team, we deal with it like in a very common basis. So how do you visualize, like, what's the role of an AI engineer in an AI company, if like our first approach must be non-AI technique, like how AI, how can we apply AI to the role, or how do you visualize like a project?
Yeah, I think most probably the questions come from the fact that now AI is a hype, and everyone feel that if I'm using AI, my startup is better. I don't think so, actually. I think that if your product is lacking certain capabilities to offer way more value to your customers using AI, you should use it. So I wouldn't advise you to force yourself to use AI. I would advise you to look for gaps that your product has, to be able to add a lot of value, and then going point by point saying, does it AI solve this? Does it AI solve that? And so on. And in order to be able to answer that, understanding which are the capabilities of different AI algorithms and which is the cost of doing that, because also something that is extremely important is that depending the model you are using, depending the type of data, and depending the metric you are trying to optimize for, iterations can be faster or way slower. And if you end up being in a functionality where you can iterate your product very, very slow because accessing the data is difficult, because adding the data to your model is difficult, most probably it's not the first thing to do in an early stage startup. So I do believe that every startup should question itself, hey, should we add AI, but in the sense of, hey, we identified these problems, is there anything we can solve with AI? For example, oncology, in my view, is an extremely nice area and industry where you could impact millions of lives. I don't think the goal is to include AI there. The goal is to impact millions of lives and reducing people suffer from cancer and the consequence of that. If that is solved by AI or not is kind of the next question. But the first question is, how can you get to more patients? How can you make life of your patients better?
Okay, thank you so much.
Next one we have Alejandro.
Thank you.
Hey guys, good afternoon. Hey Sebastian. I have a question regarding what was the reception like of your solution to what I think is a very traditional industry, such as like the hospitals and doctors, you know, because I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I don't know if you ever came across with, I don't know, a doctor, director of a hospital that said, well, I have been studying and seeing patients for 20 years. Why am I going to, I don't know, let a machine or an algo tell me like the exact way to deal with a patient or anything related with that. And what was your pitch? What was your pitch to convince them? I would love to know it, if it's possible.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. It is a very hard industry. I think once, twice a day, a week, me and my team ask ourselves the question, should we continue in this? Because there is something that happens every single day, which tell us, oh, this is fucking difficult. But it's very rewarding when you see that more patients are being treated, when you see that people working in a hospital have a much better way of doing their work, and when you see amazing things happening. So it's a very difficult industry. We started in the wrong way. So I'm going to start talking about failures and then what we did to overcome those failures. We started by focusing on the technology. So the first conversations I had with doctors, nurses, directors of hospitals was asking them, hey, what applications do you think we could create for, like, use AI to solve your problems? First of all, they don't understand what AI is. And they don't have also time to start thinking, okay, these guys, they talk about AI, I don't know what that is, and they want me to solve problems that I don't know about. So it was a very frustrating process during that period. We changed that approach. We start by first going to hospitals and then understanding how a hospital works. It's incredible how complex are the operations of a hospital. So many different stakeholders, so many different types of people that need to come together and do different things in order to provide care to patients. It's incredible, the complexity. So first we went in, we understand that. And once that happened, then we make a list of what we believe were the main problems of hospitals in Colombia and Latin America. And we went with this list, not to doctors, not to nurses. We went with this list to financial directors. And we said to them, hey guys, from this list, if we would have products for every of these needs you have, which are the ones that you would pay for? And then the list reduced extremely. It was like 15 problems. And then after talking to financial directors, we came to 3. And it was like, all right, so in order to be a first product that hospitals would buy and would add value, then we would need to focus on this. And actually, it was not only because for the financial directors, the money is important, but because they see it in a very mathematical way. They say, hey, I have these problems. This is creating these inefficiencies in the hospital, and it has these certain potentials of increasing number of patients, increasing revenue of the hospital, reducing costs, and so on. And at the end, if we can do that, we are going to be able to provide better care and treat more patients. So then we, of course, then we talk to operations people at the hospital, we talk to doctors, nurses, we talk to general directors, and we start to build an MVP for the main problem we saw in hospitals, which was the following. When you come in, the emergency departments are at 200%, 300% of the capacity they have to receive patients. And you believe that that's because there is no beds in hospitalization to receive more patients. But if you go to hospitalization, then you realize that there is many patients that have been waiting for hours, even for days, to be released. And that there is many beds that are not being used in a proper way. So we basically built a platform to make, first of all, possible real-time visualization of what is going on in the hospital. So you can imagine everyone in the hospital has a dashboard where they can see in real time what is happening, how many beds are free, how many beds are occupied, which are the bottlenecks for patients to be released, how many patients you have waiting for beds and so on. And that's being used from the general director up to the people cleaning the beds, because in this way, and of course, clustering the information and giving each people the right information, people know what to do, when to do it, and then people feel more satisfied because they feel more efficient. So we start doing that, and then it was more about this needs to prove that it's able to affect the main metrics of the hospitals. There are two main metrics in a hospital. First of all, how many patients can you treat in a month, which is called the bed turnover. Second of all, which is your revenue and how this is associated to your cost. So we had to affect these two metrics, and going from that, hospital said, okay, guys, first of all, you are solving our main problem, and that's great. A lot of startups come here solving problems we don't have or we don't really care about. Second thing, you are really solving it because you are affecting not only satisfaction of people, but also the metrics. And then they say, what else can you do for us? So now the conversation turns to the other side. They asking us, hey, can you do please this and this and that? So we are expanding now more from hospitalization to many other different areas in the hospitals, and actually going also out of the hospital to other healthcare institutions that also treat patients. So it needs to be kind of understanding what is the biggest pain of your customer, who is going to pay for that, what is the most important thing for them, and then providing a real solution for that. Which at the beginning didn't have to do anything with AI, to be extremely honest. Now, after building that first product and showing those first results, we can bring AI and make our product much better. Directors of hospitals don't care about AI. Directors of hospitals and big groups and everyone in healthcare care about, can you really make us efficient and work as a better organization?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Next, we have Juan Pisco.
All right. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Sebastián, for being here. Just going to make like a quick presentation of myself, just to give some context of the question. So before I was a founder of an AA company, I was actually an ML engineer. So I do have like some background on that. And I remember like the first time, and this is related to like health tech, the first time I made like a model that predicted pneumonia, right, with like X-ray and stuff. And I was like, well, that's crazy, because like humans can get to like 70% of precision, and my model was up to like 95. And I was like, wow, this is great. So also I worked at a biotech company, and I did like the AI algorithm to tune hearing aids, like people with hearing discapacities. I tuned that with an AI model. And that was pretty cool also, because like people got the benefit of like, without going to an audiologist, they could like tune their hearing aids without like wasting time and money in the US. So it's pretty cool. And this context goes to, how do you see the future? It's more like a philosophical question, actually, but how do you see a future in terms of like, well, not math, but medicine, I mean. So how do you see the future in terms of medicine with AI and robotics? Now, I think you have like a perfect background to answer that question. You have robotics and you have AI and you have health now. So yeah, how do you see the future? Do you see like people coming to be part of the solution, or you just see like robots in hospitals and that's pretty much it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I try to reflect on this many times every week. There was a post recently by Andreessen and Horowitz where they were saying that the next big company is going to be into healthcare. Like saying, hey, there have been Googles, Metas, there have been Apples, and the next industry we believe is going to allow the creation of the next big company is going to be healthcare. And they were saying that actually there are some things that have changed now for that to happen. First, the technological advancements. Second, the amount of money that is invested into healthcare by governments and the which is related to aging of population and new and more people getting sick and so on. And I do believe that there is a huge potential into healthcare. I think the future will look like the following. There will be very successful companies in B2C helping patients and helping people even to prevent being a patient. Then I think the main challenge there is not going to be technology. The main challenge there is to find ways that people kind of become more and more interested into solutions for this. This is changing with generations. I think people is getting more and more interested into their own health, but to go in that direction. Then I also think that B2B is also an incredible, has an incredible potential in the sense that if you look at the technological solutions that current enterprise use for providing healthcare, this is like from the 50s, this is like from the 70s, it's incredible. And the reason of that, one of the reasons that I realize and one of my main takeaways, the main problem is not that the technology is the best or the worst technology. The main problem is how companies approach healthcare institutions as customers. They basically build a software for doing whatever. And they say to hospitals, they say to doctors, they say to nurses, hey, here is the software. This is the solution for your problem. Bye. And they disappear. And they are looking for the next customers. And reality is that no one at the hospitals or at any institution providing healthcare has the time or has the knowledge to do anything with those software. So providing software to people providing healthcare institution needs to be very coupled with helping them make the best out of that software. And this is one of the things that has helped us a lot to gain more and more hospitals. I mean, we have been working, we start building our product beginning of last year. We released the first version mid last year, and from there, we have gained more than 10 hospitals, and some of them, as I mentioned before, are groups that we are expanding there. And when I talk to everyone at our customers and I ask them, hey, why is it that you like us? They say, because you are here and you help us understand how to use your software to generate results. And if you look at our health tech startups, they build products for 4 years, and they have maybe cooperation with a couple of hospitals, which doesn't mean that hospitals are paying for the products, because hospitals don't have a lot of money. So if they invest into products, it's for something that they really think is good. So I think the way that people or startups or companies in general approach the customer relationship is going to be key, not only for build big companies, but also for enable healthcare institutions and healthcare people really use the technology in the advantage of patients, which is at the end the main thing here.
Thank you.
Great. I think Gonzalo, you're next.
Hello, Sebastián. Nice meeting you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you for the small workshop. Pretty useful, mostly because, a brief context, I'm also founder of a B2B SaaS company. We also work with data of the company, and the purpose is to make them more efficient. So we have some common things in there, but we are focused in the freight industry, in the transportation, right? So my question is more about the business side. I know that maybe there's some things that you don't want to make them public or open, but as much as you can, that will be pretty useful for me. How do you manage sales on a B2B SaaS product? Because at least for us, given that the clients are also quite close, they don't want to listen to new startups, especially if they come from young people like us, right? So just want to know how you deal with that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and for us in health tech is one of the biggest challenges. Some of the lessons I have got during this time is that it's going to be very difficult to reduce the sales cycle. There is a kind of every industry has a sales cycle. You can speed up things, but selling to A industry is going to last different than selling to B industry. So one of the things is to understand, okay, if my sales cycle in B2B is too long in this particular industry, because there is many people that need to align to take the decision of buying, because the amount of stakeholders and the different backgrounds make it difficult to take a decision sooner, because you first need to show results before being able to sell anything. And because there is in general no a lot of trust in that industry for software solution, then trying to reduce the sales cycle is something you could try, and we have somehow success into that. At the same time, it's about getting kind of a numbers game, right? So if you have 10 institutions and for whatever reason 7 said to you no, it's different than if you have 50 and then you kind of increase the chances of getting opportunity to show your product. So I think first is kind of try to reach as many companies as possible. This is the first thing I would say. Second thing is that in certain industries, going with a kind of important company or important customer in that sector is going to open you many other doors. So when we started in one of the best clinics in Colombia, that opened us many doors because it creates credibility and they talk a lot to each other. And the last thing is be ready to show your product and show results in a short time before being able to get any revenue. So try to make your pilots, or be ready to do pilots, but try to do it as efficient as possible and also as short as possible so that you can accelerate your sales cycle.
Sorry, I think it caught, but I heard the 3 main solutions that you gave. Just the second one was talking to who?
Yeah, exactly. So sorry, there was maybe a problem with my internet. The first one was kind of, well, the second one you are asking for that. Be able to get leverage or the network effects that there are in the industry. When we got to the first important hospital, one of the most important in Colombia, that opened us a lot of doors. That was a key for us, and it was basically generate a lot of credibility for our product, and they talk, decision makers in this institution talk a lot to each other, and they know each other from events and so on. So try to get an open door in kind of the reference customers in that industry.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And last one, we have Juan Luis.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, Sebastián. Thank you for your time and for what you do to save lives. Well, my question is, I'm a computer science student. It's like a curiosity. I mean, do your startups and some others that run AI models, run all their models in the cloud, or maybe it makes sense that in a medium term they invest on some self-infrastructure to do it?
I think if you are a startup, what makes more sense is to do it in the cloud. I mean, I was doing that, doing self-infrastructure during my PhD at Mercedes-Benz, because at that point, I'm talking about 2014, 2013, cloud, there was not a lot of cloud solutions for building AI models into the cloud, and there was not many tools. But nowadays, this is something you get. Of course, you need to pay a price. But if you balance the cost, the extra cost of using cloud to the time you need to invest into building your own infrastructure, I think makes much more sense to use the cloud to build your first product, and then from there on you can think about it. But at the beginning, cloud definitely.
Okay, yeah, I know at the beginning always like the cloud, but I didn't know like if you are like 1 year or 2 years after you got an MVP and you are going well, maybe it makes sense to have self-infrastructure. Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
so we made kind of every 2 years those studies comparing cost of using cloud to cost of using self-infrastructure, time investment, and so on. And most of the time, you have also limited time and limited human resources. I think in the long term also makes sense cloud, but it remains to be seen how expensive kind of the pricing of the cloud solutions kind of go into the future, because more and more people are using this. They also have limited resources, and if the created demand and the short supply is going to increase prices, then it could be a different story in the future, and needs to be seen.
Okay, thank you so much, Sebastián.
Thank you.
Amazing. So I think that was the last question. And well, I think that's pretty much it. All I wanted to say is thanks a lot to everyone for investing your time with us today. Also, obviously, thanks a lot to you, Sebastián, for sharing your knowledge. I mean, I got to know you almost for 2 years, and today I got to learn more about from you professionally. It was pretty amazing. And just as a reminder, as I said, this is an initiative from makers. We want to democratize the access to artificial intelligence in Latin America. So we created a group, which I have been sending here via the chat. I will be also be sending you a WhatsApp with Flora for the recording and to remind you of this. So if you have any feedback, anyone that we should invite for the next sessions, please let us know. We will do that via Flora. And once again, Sebastián, thanks a lot for being here today. It was an amazing session, and well, have an amazing afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really nice to be here, and feel free to reach out if you have further questions. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.